My name is Caleb Whitmore, and I'm 32 years old. I was born in a weather-beaten farmhouse just outside Asheville, Georgia, raised between cornfields and cattle. My father died young, and my mother spent most of her days bent over a sewing machine. I was the eldest of two, and my sister Evelyn, younger by 3 years, was the only family I had left when Mama passed. We were close once, Evelyn and I. In our childhood, she followed me everywhere even when I tried to shake her. I remember her muddy boots stomping through the tobacco rows, her laugh louder than the cicadas. Mama used to say, "You two fight like cats, but you'd never survive a day apart." Time proved her wrong. It was the spring of 1952, and I was running a small woodworking shop on the edge of Asheville, fixing wagons, fences, and anything a man could hammer together. Life was plain but honest. Evelyn had moved to Dawson, 2 counties over, when she married David Miller, a railway clerk. She wrote often at first long, careful letters full of drawings and poetry and gossip. Then, fewer. Then none. 2 years passed with no word. Then one night, just after closing shop, a letter came. Not from her, from David. "Evelyn's sick. Real bad. A twisted mass in her abdomen. The doctors want $30,000 for surgery and recovery. She doesn't want to ask, but I am. She's too proud, Caleb. Please." I stared at the page, hands trembling. In 1952, $30,000 was near enough the value of my entire shop, tools and all. I didn't hesitate. I went to the bank, pulled my savings, inheritance, and sold my timber stock. Within 2 days, the cash was delivered by rail post, wrapped in oilskin and labeled urgent. I even included a short letter. "Dear Evelyn, I don't know why you vanished, but family doesn't quit. Save yourself. That's all that matters." No reply. Not after 1 week or 2. I sent 3 more letters, then a telegram. No answer. I called the Dawson station. "No one by that name works here anymore," they said. In July, I hitched a ride to Dawson and walked right up to the address they'd written me from. A little yellow house with blue shutters. But no Evelyn. No David. The neighbors said they moved out a month after the surgery, and no one knew where. I went back home, my pocket empty and my heart sick. I had nothing left. I tried to forget, but something in my gut wouldn't settle. 6 months later, a traveling salesman from Chattahoochee stopped in my shop for a wheel repair. While we chatted, he mentioned a fine dress shop in the city, run by a red-haired woman with a voice like molasses and a laugh you could hear from across the street. "You'd never guess she used to be from the country," he said. "But she sure made it out." He said her name once. It hit me like a mallet to the chest. Evelyn. I didn't sleep that night. The salesman's words kept clanging in my mind like a loose wagon wheel. A red-haired woman, from the country, named Evelyn, running a fine little shop in Chattahoochee. Either it was the world's cruelest coincidence, or the truth had just shown its face for the first time. 2 days later, I caught a ride into town with Mr. Hal Granger, who delivered eggs and salt pork to Chattahoochee every Thursday morning. The road was bumpy, full of spring mud, but I didn't feel a thing. My chest was heavy with something I couldn't name. Hope, maybe. Rage, too. We arrived before noon. The town looked like most others. One main street, a square with a dried-up fountain, and a red brick courthouse that cast a long shadow. I asked around for a dress shop, and sure enough, an older man selling newspapers tipped his cap toward Oak Row, where 3 glass window boutiques stood side by side. And there she was, Evelyn, standing in the window of a store named the Blue Hem. She was radiant, wearing a light green dress, soft curls falling down her shoulders, smiling as she pinned fabric to a mannequin. She didn't look sick, didn't look recovering. She looked wealthy and happy. She turned toward the street. For a moment, our eyes didn't meet. I stepped back behind a lamppost, breathing hard. The lies, the money, the months of silence, they all came roaring back like a freight train with no brakes. But I didn't go in. Not yet. I rented a room for the night above Shelley's Diner and sat with a cup of coffee until my thoughts stopped spinning. I didn't want revenge, not the kind with fists or shouting. I wanted truth. I wanted answers. And I wanted my name cleared in the one place Evelyn had buried it, the truth in front of the law. The next morning, I returned to the Blue Hem. Not as a brother, but as a stranger. I walked in. The bell above the door chimed softly. She looked up. She paused. Her smile dimmed just slightly, then returned. "Well now," she said, folding her hands. "If it isn't the ghost from Asheville." She knew. She didn't ask how I found her, or why I came. She didn't hug me. She didn't cry. You look well, I said quietly. I am well, she replied. And you still wearing the same boots? I never had reason to change them. I said. There was silence, thick as river mud. Finally I asked, so when did the surgery happen, Evelyn? She gave a small laugh. Surgery? She repeated. Oh, that was David's lie. I never needed anything fixed except maybe my patience. I stared at her, unblinking. You got $30,000, Evelyn? Yes, she said, folding her arms. I did. And you disappeared. I did what I had to do, she replied coolly. You were always so eager to rescue people. You wanted to feel like a hero. Well, you had your moment. I let you. I left that shop with my heart hollowed out. I'd heard of thieves, but never thought I'd find one in my own blood. I sat under the courthouse tree, watching pigeons fight over crumbs until the clock struck 3. Then I walked into the courthouse, and I filed a claim, not just a letter, not just a complaint. I had receipts from the bank. I had a copy of the telegram. I had the original envelope marked urgent, with the same Dawson address that Evelyn later denied ever living at. The clerk looked up from her desk. You're saying this woman took your money under false pretenses? No, I said flatly. I'm saying she stole it. She took my mother's last wishes, my life savings, my trust. Then she replied, let's make that official. The courthouse clerk, Miss Jean Avery, had tight silver curls and spectacles that never left her nose. She walked me through the forms gently, like someone who knew how betrayal felt in the bones. You'll want to file a civil recovery suit, she said. Fraud, misrepresentation of need, and unlawful appropriation of funds. Her pencil scratched across the yellow form. Is there a paper trail? I placed a small bundle on the table. There's a money order receipt from Asheville Bank. The carbon copy of the telegram I sent David Miller. A signed rail post acknowledgement showing she received the envelope. And letters. Miss Avery's eyes paused on that last part. Letters? Her handwriting, I said, laying down the folded sheets. Before she disappeared, she used to write me once a month. The same hand that wrote the address on the envelope that took my money. She nodded slowly. That'll do. I paid the $10 filing fee with coins wrapped in brown paper. It was everything I had left. 2 weeks later, Evelyn received a summons. It was delivered by the county deputy, Walter Hensley, who'd once taught me how to fix a fence when I was 10. He caught me outside my shop one morning and shook his head. Thought I'd never see the day, Caleb, he muttered. Your sister's face went white as milk when she opened the envelope. She read it? She read every word. He leaned in slightly. She said, and I quote, he has no proof. Let him waste his time. But she didn't know me. She didn't know how long a man can carry a wound before it bleeds out into resolve. The trial was set for early October, just as the leaves started falling in Asheville. The courthouse smelled of old varnish and books. The judge presiding over the case was Judge Margaret Ellis, a stern woman in her 60s, with no time for sentimental theatrics. The courtroom wasn't crowded. A few townsfolk came, likely curious. My friend Eli Bennett sat in the back, hat in lap, nodding support. I sat to the left. Evelyn entered from the right. She was dressed in navy silk, chin high. No David in sight. Plaintiff, state your opening. Judge Ellis said. I stood. My name is Caleb Whitmore. I am the sole living relative of the defendant, Miss Evelyn Miller. In March of 1952, I sent her $30,000 under the belief she was dying. She accepted it, then vanished. Today I ask this court to recognize that money not as a gift of charity, but as one given under false pretenses. Evelyn smiled. Faintly, she stood when the judge called her to speak. My brother is confused, she said smoothly. There was never an agreement, no signature, no contract, just his decision. And now, he regrets it. Judge Ellis tapped her pen. And what was the purpose of the money, Miss Miller? I don't know, she replied. I didn't ask for it. That was the moment I pulled out the telegram. I have here a message from Mr. David Miller, her husband, dated March 14, 1952, pleading for funds to save Evelyn's life. It was sent from Dawson Station, verified by the train office clerk, who signed as witness. Judge Ellis took the slip, adjusted her glasses, and read silently. And the acknowledgement of funds received? The judge asked. I presented the rail post receipt. her signature scrawled at the bottom. Evelyn's face began to shift like a mask cracking. Over the next hour, I laid out the letters, her handwriting, her old address, the call logs from Asheville's phone operator showing I tried reaching them 5 times in June. Evelyn tried to dismiss each as coincidence, but every detail painted the same picture: a woman who lied, a man who trusted, a debt buried beneath silk. And silence. By the end of the session, Judge Ellis leaned forward. "Miss Miller," she said, "did you at any point inform your brother that the request was false?" Evelyn hesitated. "No, ma'am." The silence after Evelyn's "no, ma'am" was so thick, I swear you could hear dust floating through sunbeams. Judge Ellis didn't blink. "Then let it be entered into record that the defendant never denied the request for funds, and made no attempt to correct a claim of life-threatening illness. Proceed." Evelyn sat down with a quiet sigh, but I knew that sound. It wasn't defeat. It was calculation. Her attorney, a well-fed man from Bainbridge named Mr. Lowell Turner, rose next. He adjusted his vest and addressed the jury with what he likely thought was charm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this is not a case of fraud, but family misunderstanding. There was no written contract, no obligation, just a generous man with a tender heart. Miss Miller never requested money, never signed any agreement, and she owes him nothing." He paced slowly, hands folded behind his back. "We mustn't turn a sibling's charity into a courtroom ledger. Is that the future we want for love and loyalty to be itemized like grocery lists?" The words were clever, but they didn't change the facts. After a short recess, the court reconvened. I was called back to the stand. Mr. Turner tried to rattle me. He showed the jury one of Evelyn's letters. It said, "You've always been the strong one, Caleb. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Does that sound like someone trying to deceive you?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "Yes," I said, "because after this letter, she disappeared, took my mother's heirloom ring, emptied the post office box, and started a new life across the state." The jury murmured. Turner stiffened. He flipped to another document. "And here," he said, waving a receipt, "is your own signature on a money order. Nowhere on it does it say loan or repayable. You sent it freely, did you not?" "I sent it believing she would die," I said, "and she let me believe it. That's what makes it theft." Judge Ellis raised her gavel lightly. "This court does not require the word loan when deceit is involved. If the defendant knowingly encouraged a false belief for personal gain, it qualifies as fraudulent inducement." Turner sat down more pale than red now. Next came a witness I hadn't expected, Marianne Cross, a seamstress who once worked for Evelyn in Chattahoochee. She had dark skin and soft hands, and she looked uneasy as she took the stand. "Did Miss Miller ever mention her brother Caleb to you?" the judge asked. Marianne nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." "And what did she say?" "She said he was foolish, that he'd do anything for her if she made." Her voice tremble a little. "Said she once got him to pawn their father's watch just to fix a cracked window." There was a gasp in the gallery. I closed my eyes, heart twisting. The last piece of Papa's memory gone for a lie. Marianne looked down. "I quit 2 months after that. Couldn't stay under someone who wore silk bought with guilt." The courtroom shifted then. Even Evelyn's posture broke. Her shoulders dropped, her fingers twitching nervously in her lap. I remembered how she used to do that when we were children and caught sneaking jam. Judge Ellis looked at her sharply. "Miss Miller, would you like to revise your testimony?" Evelyn didn't stand. She didn't answer. The judge spoke anyway. "This court finds, based on clear evidence and corroborating testimony, that the defendant knowingly misled the plaintiff for financial gain. The amount of $30,000 is to be repaid in full, with 4% interest calculated from March 1952. The gavel came down like thunder. Outside the courthouse, the wind was dry and bitter. I stood at the steps watching folks scatter like leaves, whispering about the Whitmore siblings. Evelyn passed by me with her chin tucked low. She didn't look at me, but I looked at her, and for a moment, I didn't feel triumph. I felt hollow. Love that turns to deceit doesn't leave victory in its place. It leaves silence. That night, I sat on my porch in Asheville with a bottle of rye and the telegram in my hand. Not to read it, just to remember who I had been when I received it. A brother, a believer. 3 nights after the verdict, the autumn wind brought more than dry leaves to my doorstep. It was nearing 7:30, and I was closing up the shop, oiling the hinges on the back gate, when I saw the silhouette. A slim figure at the edge of the gravel path, barely lit by the lantern beside the porch. She wore no hat. Her navy coat looked damp at the sleeves, and though her stance was proud, her eyes blue and once sharp as glass looked hollow now. Evelyn. I didn't speak. She stepped forward, her boots crunching softly on the gravel. You got what you wanted, she said. Is that enough? I didn't answer her question. I just looked at her. Her voice broke the stillness again. I thought I'd feel angry, she said. But mostly I feel like you and I are the only people left who remember who we used to be. I laughed just once. Who you used to be and who you are now seem very different, Evelyn. She bit her lip. I never wanted to hurt you. Then why did you do it? She paused. I wanted out of that life, Caleb. Out of poverty. Out of Asheville. Out of being someone's daughter. Someone's sister. Someone's burden. David said he'd take me to Charleston if I could bring him enough to start a business. So you traded me for a man and a store? No, she said softly. I traded myself for a chance. She looked down, as if ashamed. But I was wrong. About him. About what I'd find. Her voice cracked again. David left 6 months ago. Ran off with a widow from Montgomery who had a tobacco farm. Said I wasn't worth the debt I brought with me. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I felt nothing but the cold rising through my boots. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a check, drawn on the First State Bank of Charleston, made out in full 30,000 plus. Interest. Judge said you could garnish my wages, she murmured. But I thought maybe I could beat you to it. She laid it gently on the porch rail and backed away. I have nothing left, Caleb, she said. Not money, not marriage, not pride, just memories. And even those are starting to feel like fiction. I stared at the check. You expect forgiveness? She shook her head. No, I just wanted you to know I finally told the truth. Even if it's too late. She turned to leave, but I called her name, Evelyn. She stopped but didn't turn. I want you to tell me one thing, I said. That night, the birthday telegram. Did you really believe I would send the money? Her shoulders rose slowly, then fell. I knew you would, she whispered. You always did the right thing, even when no one deserved it. And then she walked off into the dusk, disappearing down the road that led to the old train station. I watched her go, a ghost with a heartbeat, and held the check in trembling fingers. Later that night, I sat with Eli Bennett, sipping weak coffee on his porch. She came back? He asked. Yeah, you forgive her? I looked at the stars. I don't know. Maybe some debts ain't about money. Maybe the biggest ones are the ones you can't collect. Eli nodded slowly. So what'll you do now? I folded the check and slipped it into my coat. Cash it, I said, and never speak her name again. The next morning, I stood in line at First State Bank in Bainbridge. The clerk, Miriam, a thin woman with a pinched nose and a tired smile, took the check and examined the signature. Looks in order, she said. Any particular way you want it withdrawn? In cash. She blinked. All of it? All of it? She vanished into the back room and returned 10 minutes later with crisp bills in a brown envelope. 31,200, she said. Count it if you'd like. I didn't. I walked out of that bank with the weight of a small fortune in my coat pocket and something heavier still in my chest. Victory should feel better than this. I didn't go home straight after cashing the check. Instead, I walked down to the old cemetery hill, where the Miller family stones stood in 2 crooked rows. The air was sharp and dry. The wind, for once, didn't carry judgment, just leaves. I stood in front of Ma's grave, staring at the moss growing over her name. Sarah Miller, 1896 to 1943, wife, mother, believer in lost causes. I sat on the low stone wall, letting the silence press in. This money, this 31,200, what good was it now? It couldn't buy back my father's watch, couldn't return the land we lost when the drought hit in 46, couldn't erase the memory of me sleeping on the porch that winter because Evelyn said I scared her when I drank too much coffee and paced the floor, and it sure as hell couldn't fix what we became. Later that evening, as I lit the lamp back at the house, I found an envelope tucked beneath the doorframe. No stamp, just my name in long, slanted handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single page, a letter. Caleb, you don't know me. My name is Margaret Sloan. I work at the Hillside Hospice Center in Charleston. I met your sister Evelyn during her brief stay here last month. She didn't say much at first, mostly stared out the window, and talked about birds she used to feed on a windowsill as a girl. But one night, when the power went out during the storm, she told me everything. She told me about the money, the lie, the courtroom. She told me about the ring she sold and how she kept the letter you wrote on your birthday folded in her sewing kit all these years. She cried when she said your name, Caleb. She said, "My brother didn't lose his money. He lost me, and I never gave him a reason worth the trade." She left before we could talk again. I thought you should know. I sat in the kitchen for hours. After that, the kettle boiled dry. The lamplight flickered low. Something inside me, a knot that had twisted for years, tightened further, then finally loosened. I didn't cry, but I didn't sleep either. The next day, I went to see Maggie Holt, the town's only notary. She was surprised to see me carrying a stack of bills wrapped in a cotton cloth. "I need to make a transfer," I said. "Donation?" She raised a brow. "Donation to who?" "STT, Lydia's hospital. The one where Ma used to volunteer before her chest got bad." She smiled faintly. "You sure? That's most of your court winnings, isn't it?" I nodded. "Some. Things need to end better than they started." 2 weeks later, I found myself standing outside the Asheville schoolhouse, where the chalkboard still creaked and the bell rope hung frayed. Inside, I handed Principal Mercer an envelope with the rest of the money. "Put it toward books," I told him. "Music, heat in winter." He looked stunned. "Caleb, are you sure about this?" I stared out the window. Children were chasing a hoop with a stick down the dusty path. "I am." The day after that, I boarded the early train to Charleston. The sky was the color of pale fire. My coat smelled of cedar. I had a note in my pocket, a reply for Margaret Sloan. I just wanted to thank her for telling me what Evelyn couldn't. I didn't expect to find Evelyn. I didn't expect to see her again, but I wanted to leave behind the echo that revenge often becomes. T. The Charleston Hospice Center. I was told Evelyn had left weeks earlier. No forwarding address, no new number, just gone like breath on a mirror. But Miss Sloan greeted me by the garden gate, eyes kind behind thick glasses. "She was scared you'd come," she said softly. "But she was more scared you wouldn't." I nodded. "She left this behind," Margaret added, handing me a cloth bundle tied with red twine. Inside was my mother's silver locket, long thought lost, and a tiny sewing kit worn, cracked at the corners. Tucked inside the lining was my birthday letter, yellowed with age, still folded just how I'd sent it. I stood by the hospice gate until sundown, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. Not money, not fury, not regret. That night, I returned to my room at the inn, lit the fire, and sat in silence. I thought about Ma's words long ago. People either run from family or they run for them. The brave ones come back. Evelyn didn't come back, but maybe I did. 3 weeks passed. The leaves had turned gold and copper, and the breeze across Asheville's fields had the clean bite of November. Life settled into a quiet rhythm, chopping wood in the morning, delivering orders in the afternoon, and sitting by the fire most nights with a cup of chicory and old radio tunes whispering from the parlor shelf. That's when the parcel arrived. It was postmarked Laramie, Wyoming, and wrapped in thick brown paper tied with black string. My name was scrawled in big, awkward handwriting, Caleb Miller. No return address. Inside was a worn leather-bound journal, wrapped in blue fabric, and a note handwritten on lined paper. "You don't know me, but I knew Evelyn. We were close. I think she wanted you to see this. I'm not asking for anything, but some truths need light. No full name, just initials." I stared at the letter a long while before I even touched the journal. My hands hesitated, unsure if I was ready to read anything more about Evelyn, especially from a stranger. But I opened it anyway. The pages were filled with entries in Evelyn's hand. Neat cursive, dated over several years. Most were mundane. Grocery lists, dreams she had, observations about the sky, quotes from books. Then, somewhere around the halfway point, the tone shifted. March 4, 1951. David says he needs more. More money, more trust, more patience. I gave him everything. Caleb's money wasn't enough. He says it was never about the house, it was about proving I could be useful. A partner. I wonder now if I was just a ladder. April 19, 1951. He's seeing someone else. I know it. The woman at the feed store stared at me like she'd already heard everything. It burns. My stomach burns all the time. June 5, 1951. I pawned Ma's locket. I said I lost it. I didn't. I used the money to follow David to Laramie. He didn't want me there. He left anyway. I see now what I traded. Not the money but my brother. The only person who ever came when I didn't call. I closed the journal. The fire in the hearth had dimmed. Outside, the wind howled through the shutters. The next morning, I took the letter and the journal to Sheriff Warren. He was cleaning his pipe, eyes squinting behind thick glasses. "Caleb," he said, setting the stem down, "you think this David fella might have done something criminal?" "I don't know. Maybe not legally. But morally?" Warren gave a low whistle. "That's murkier than the mill pond. Back home, I couldn't let go of the initials. Dryer's David. R. My thoughts churned. Who would send a journal like that? Not a friend. Not an enemy. Someone guilty? Maybe. Or someone trying to confess through silence. That night, I lit the lamp and wrote a reply. I mailed it to the same post office in Laramie, care of general delivery, in case the sender was checking for letters. I read the journal. "If you were close to Evelyn, then maybe you can tell me something. Did she ever find peace? Even a little?" See, Malertwa weeks passed. Then, a letter came, typed this time. No name, no fluff, just 3 lines. "She had peace. Only when she talked about you. She called you her compass. I think she hoped you'd forgive her, even if you never said it." I folded the letter slowly and put it in the sewing kit with my old birthday card. That weekend, I took a train west. Not for revenge, not for answers, but to see Laramie with my own eyes. To walk the streets where Evelyn followed a man who left her empty. To feel the wind where she once stood a lone dot in Laramie. I met a woman at a corner bookstore, Martha Raines. Kind eyes, strong voice. "You're Evelyn's brother?" she asked when I mentioned her name. I nodded. "She used to sit by that window every Sunday," Martha said, pointing to a small chair facing the street. "Never bought much, just read. The same copy of Great Expectations. Said it reminded her of someone who gave up everything for family." I stood there for a long while, and bought that very book. On the train back to Asheville, I wrote a note and tucked it between the pages. "Forgiveness is heavier than anger, but it carries farther. Wherever you are, Evelyn, I hope you found light." I came home to Asheville with a calm I hadn't felt in years. Not peace exactly, but something close. I kept Evelyn's journal tucked inside my coat pocket during the entire train ride. Sometimes I'd reach in just to feel it, as if holding that piece of her made up for everything time and pride had stolen. The snow had begun to fall back in Asheville, light flurries coating the fields, dusting rooftops like powdered sugar. Smoke rose from chimneys. Church bells echoed faintly in the valley. My boots left deep prints in the path as I walked toward the house. It looked the same. Nothing had changed, but something had. On my doorstep sat a manila envelope, heavy, sealed with red wax, and neatly written across the front, "For Caleb J. Miller, executor, reading. Evelyn D. Miller." For a long time, I didn't move. Inside, I laid the envelope on the table and lit the lantern. My fingers trembled a little as I broke the seal. There were 3 items: a folded legal document, a small silver locket newly polished, and a letter written in Evelyn's handwriting. "Dear Caleb, if this reaches you, it means I didn't come back in time. I wish I had. I wanted to, but fear makes fools of all of us. There's no way to rewrite the past, but there is a way to pass forward what little good remains." I made arrangements with Mr. Kemper, the lawyer in Charleston. He helped me file a will. I don't have much, but the house in Laramie is in my name now, and there's a bit left from the sale of Mama's jewelry. It's yours, not for what you gave, but for what you never took back. Inside the locket is a picture of us back when we still built forts in the barn, and I used to braid your hair when no one was looking. You were my compass. I said that, didn't I? I hope you'll forgive me, and I hope you'll sell the house or burn it down, if you like. But don't hold on to ashes. Ashes don't warm hands. They only darken what's left. Goodbye, Caleb. With all I never said, Evelyn. I sat still for a long time, her voice echoing in the room though the air was silent. The locket felt warm in my palm. I pressed it open, and sure enough, there we were, 2 dusty kids with wild grins, no hint of the years to come. Later that week, I rode out to the far edge of town to visit Lawyer Kemper. He was a narrow man with sunken cheeks and stiff knuckles. His eyes softened when he saw me. "I wondered when you'd come," he said. He slid the deed across the desk. "Property in Laramie, 1.5 acres, house, shed, and a bit of credit in the bank from the final auction Evelyn authorized. It's all yours." I looked down at the paper. "Legal, binding, final. What if I don't want it?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Then burn it." But no, she gave it to you freely. For once, the next day, I sat at Ma's grave again, this time with the locket in one hand and the deed in the other. Guess I won't be keeping the house, I muttered. I lit a match and held it to the edge of the paper. It caught quick, curled like a snake in flame. I watched it burn until nothing was left but ash drifting in the winter air. I didn't smile, but I didn't cry either. A month later, I used Evelyn's remaining funds to refurbish the schoolhouse in Asheville. The back wall, once rotting and full of mildew, was rebuilt with fresh pine. Above the chalkboard, we hung a brass plaque, in memory of Evelyn D. Miller. Ashes don't warm hands. The locket hangs now beside Ma's photograph on my mantle. I never wore it, but sometimes, when I light the fire at night and the wind hums like a lullaby, I open it and look at the photo, not because I need to remember, but because I finally understand. It was a gray Wednesday when he arrived. I was unloading crates from the wagon behind the general store, hands cold and throat raw from the wind, when I saw the stranger step off the southbound coach. Tall, gray coat, bowler hat pulled low, a leather satchel slung over his shoulder, worn and scuffed. He moved slowly like a man who expected to be followed, and then, like a shadow with memory, his eyes locked on me. He didn't smile, didn't wave, he simply tipped his hat and walked over. You, Caleb Miller? He asked, voice low and dry. I am. He looked down at the gravel between us, then back up. I'm David Rayner. The name cracked through me like frost splitting a stone. For a moment, I didn't speak. I just stared at the man Evelyn had followed west. The man who'd drained her of love and money. The one who let her spiral so far down she pawned was Lockett. He wasn't what I expected. Not slick, not cruel. Just worn, tired in the bones. He glanced over his shoulder. I'm not here to ask for anything, he said. I just figured after the journal after her death you'd want to know. Know what? I asked. She didn't die in Laramie. I stepped back. What? She left, he said. After the house was sold, after she mailed the journal, I thought she was heading east. Never heard from her again. He looked me square in the eye. Where did she die? In Charleston, I said, on a friend's porch, alone. He nodded, his face sinking under invisible weight. We sat in the back room of Miller's feed supply. I poured us both a cup of hot chicory. He didn't touch his. I loved her once, David said, but I was stupid. Thought the world owed me something. Money, loyalty, devotion. I confused charm with character. He pulled something from his satchel. A letter. My father passed, he said. Left me a ranch and a debt I didn't know about. I had to sell. By the time Evelyn came to Laramie, I was halfway gone. Why'd you take her money? He winced. Because she gave it. Because I told myself it was her choice. But you and I both know I manipulated her into it. I sipped the bitter drink, my hand tight around the cup. She wrote about you. I said. He nodded. I figured. That's why I sent the journal. I didn't know how to say anything else. He looked at me a long while. I came here to say I'm sorry. I shook my head slowly. That doesn't make things right. I know, he said, standing. But maybe it can keep them from getting worse. Before he left, he placed the letter on the table. She left this with the lawyer in Laramie. Told him to send it to me if she didn't return by winter. But I think it's meant for you. After he left, I stared at the envelope for hours before opening it. It was short. David, if you ever come looking, tell Caleb the truth. Tell him I let you go. I stopped chasing ghosts because I finally remembered who built my first fire, who pulled me from the creek, who carried Ma's body after the doctor gave up. He deserves peace, not more shadows. And you, if you're still alive, don't come back to me. Just be better. That's all I ever wanted. Evelyn. The letter shook in my hands, not because of what it said, but because of what it did in single quotes. No bitterness, no plea, just grace. 3 days later, I received a telegram from Charleston. Evelyn's old friend, Miss Lucinda Park, had finally sold Evelyn's few remaining belongings at the boarding house. Among them was a pocket watch one Caleb had gifted Evelyn when she graduated from Asheville School at 16. Lucinda had held onto it, unsure if it held value. I had forgotten all about it. I sent money for its return. When it arrived, I found a folded piece of paper stuffed inside the back panel. In Evelyn's hand. When all the clocks stop, remember. The hands always pointed home. That night, I walked to the edge of the property, where the big oak tree still leaned over the stream. I buried the watch there beneath the roots. Beside a rock we once painted red with berry juice. I didn't cry, but I whispered her name once, just once. Spring came early to Asheville that year. The snows melted quietly, and the river ran full again. Children returned to the hills. Horses snorted. in open fields. The air was still cold, but it no longer bit like before. It carried memory, not mourning, and I carried peace, not the kind that comes from forgetting but the kind born from truth. Painful, slow, and clean. I took over the schoolhouse repairs myself. Mr. Nolan, the town carpenter, offered help, but I told him I needed the work. Needed to build something that wouldn't break or burn or leave in the middle of the night. We laid new flooring, repainted the shutters. I fixed the old iron bell that hadn't rung since the war. Each morning, I rang it once before the children arrived, a soft toll, not for class, but for Evelyn. It wasn't long before folks in town started to talk again, not with scorn, but with curiosity. One afternoon, a boy about 10 asked me, "Mr. Caleb, who was Evelyn?" I looked out the window, watched the wildflowers leaning in the wind. "She was my sister," I said. "And my greatest lesson." I visited Miss Lucinda Park in Charleston that summer. She met me with a warm apron and soft eyes. We sat on her porch sipping lemon water while cicadas hummed like violins in the trees. "She never stopped talking about you," Lucinda said. "Even when her heart gave out, she whispered your name." "I didn't deserve that," I said. "None of us do," she replied. "But it's grace all the same." That night, I wrote something down, something I hadn't dared in years. A letter of my own. "Evelyn, if there's any part of you left in this old town, in these trees, in these walls, I hope you've seen it. I buried the debt. I burned the deed. I let David go. I forgave you. And maybe, just maybe, I finally forgave myself too. You were right. Ashes don't warm hands, but I think they do fertilize the soil." I planted sunflowers near the oak. They're blooming now. They face the sunrise every morning. I think you'd like that. Kalibi read it once, then tucked it into the hollow of the oak where I buried the pocket watch. I sealed it with a stone and didn't look back, not out of coldness, out of release. The final twist in the tale came quietly. Nearly 7 months after David's visit, a letter arrived. No return name, just a wax seal in the shape of a hawk feather. Inside, a check for $30,000, made out to me, and a note. "Caleb, this belongs to you. Not because of debt, because of principle. I built a new life, small, but clean. I thought you should know. Don't look for me." Never cashed the check. I framed it instead and hung it in the schoolhouse, a reminder that even debts buried in shame can be honored in time. The children of Asheville grow up strong. They learn history, numbers, and the price of silence. I teach them that love is not a promise, it's a practice, a duty, one that must be earned and re-earned, especially when it fails. And every autumn, when the leaves fall red and gold, we hold a memorial. No statues, no grand speeches, just a bell, tolled once, for Evelyn, for the ones we lose, and the parts of ourselves we get back piece by piece, in the quiet, and the wind took it somewhere I couldn't follow. Subscribe to more revenge stories. Share, like, comment.